Okay. Jeff Addicott. He's a professor, Dr. Jeff Addicott, I should say. Lieutenant Colonel Doctor. How does that work? Is it doctor first or lieutenant colonel first? Oh, you're not a doctor. Yeah, but you're one of those other guys. Anyway, he's a professor at St. Mary's University. He was gracious enough to come talk to us. And without further ado, Jeff, thank you so much.
Okay, can you all hear me? Is that good? Okay, good. So before I do the talk, I'd like to spend a few moments just describing what I do for a living. I am a law professor at St. Mary's University School of Law. We are the best law school in San Antonio. We're the only law school in San Antonio. Yeah, that I cannot be contradicted on. So I did 20 years in the military, jumped out of a lot of airplanes, balloons, jet airplanes, aircraft. I've got a wonderful cadaver bone in my left foot and other maladies, but it's all well worth it. Retired and came here on the faculty at the law school, been there now for 24 years. I founded the Center for Terrorism Law right after 9/11, worked with the Bush administration very closely, worked down in Guantanamo Bay, been to Guantanamo Bay. I've testified before the United States Senate on legal issues associated with the war on terror, testified for the House of Representatives. I've done 3 amicus briefs to the Supreme Court of the United States, and worked very closely during those early years about all the legal issues, because we had a lot of legal issues back then. With the destruction of ISIS and the rise, of course, of Al-Qaeda and the demise of Al-Qaeda and the demise of ISIS under President Trump during his first term, we changed the name of our center from the Center for Terrorism Law to the Warrior Defense Project. I've been kind of doing that on the side for many years, as it were. Our symbol up at the front there shows these are 2 Greek soldiers fighting the enemy while there's an angel watching their back. Special Forces, Green Beret folks, they love to do drawings all the time and other things. So those 2, my first case was 2 Green Berets charged with murder for shooting a Taliban bomb maker in the head in Afghanistan in 2007. The bomb maker had come into the village there, and the Green Berets A-team was up in that area helping, doing what they do, working with the villagers and doing different things. So they were informed that the bomb maker had infiltrated the village. He was in hut number 35. So Captain Staffel, who's in Dallas, and Master Sergeant Anderson, they got up on a little hill. They sent their interpreter to hut number 7 to get the guy to come out. He came out, gave the order, blew his brains out. We call that a good kill. However, as you know, not all liars are murderers, but all murderers are liars. And so the Taliban got a hold of a reporter from the New York Times, and they said, the Green Berets have killed our village elder. A general back here in the United States read the article and ordered his subordinate to court-martial those 2 Green Beret soldiers. The subordinate, 1 star, said, no, we've investigated this, it's a good kill. This guy is an enemy combatant, and under the law of war, you can shoot them when they're sleeping, when they're eating, when they're chatting. In fact, that's the best time to kill an enemy, when they're not shooting at you. The only time you can't shoot them is when they have their hands up. So the general refused to do it. So this general back in the States, he ordered his JAG office clerk there to type up the charge sheet, which they did. They brought them back in handcuffs back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I think it's called Fort Liberty now, and charged him with first-degree murder. You can't make this stuff up. So I'm, heard about the case. I called the defense attorney that they had and offered my services, and my direct testimony was just that, because their defense was, yeah, we killed him. It's not like you got the wrong guy. So my role in the trial was to produce subject matter expert testimony that this is a good kill, because the government was thinking domestic criminal law. Domestic criminal law, if you see somebody on the top 10 wanted list, FBI eating at McDonald's down here, you can't pull out your service revolver and shoot him in the back of the head. But it's a different rule set for domestic criminal law and the law of war. Anyway, based on my testimony, all charges were dropped, and 18 other soldiers as well. Those charges were dropped in different cases in Afghanistan. They were also charged with murder for doing similar things. So I've been doing this now for 15 years. I've done about 300 cases so far. I only take individuals that I think are innocent, because I don't charge any money, and I never lose. What a lawyer. But you gotta get past my BS meter first. I get a lot of people calling me up, can you help my son? I had one the other day, can you help my son in Okinawa, in TDY in Japan? I said, well, what do you do? Well, he strangled this woman to death. I said, okay, well, why do you think that I should be involved in this case? You know, she said, well, the Marines taught, it was a prostitute, they were arguing over the amount of money, the Marines taught my son how to do hand-to-hand combat, therefore it's their fault. No, that's not gonna work. So that's what I kind of do. These are some of the cases that I've done that have made national headlines, front page newspaper stories, Fox News, even on MSNBC. I've done over 5,000 media interviews, every channel you can think of. And so these are some of the cases that are highlighted that are particularly outrageous. The one fellow up there that's wearing the sunglasses with the helmet, he's his dad's a Navy SEAL in Dallas. He's a Marine lieutenant, stepped on an IED in Afghanistan and was severely wounded. And he was out on patrol when that occurred. So he's back at Fort Apache at night. You know, everybody gets back in their little huts in your fort there. And they noticed that some individuals were out there digging a hole to plant more IEDs in the ground. So at that time, we had these rules of engagement that were supercilious, made no sense at all. So you have the law of war, which you gotta follow. Rules of engagement are self-imposed restrictions to win the hearts and the minds of people. They call them the military rules of engagement, but they're not the military rules of engagement. I've never met anybody in the military who said, yes, I'd love to restrict my use of violence. They're formed by the executive branch. And the executive branch has a political agenda. Oh, we want to be nice. We don't want to, upset people. So anyway, Lieutenant Waddell calls up headquarters. They have satellite images. He said, you guys see this out there? I want permission to kill these people. And they hemmed and hawed and wrung their hands. Oh, I don't know if we give you permission or not. And they finally said, yes, you can shoot them, but you have to use the least intrusive means. So we got 2 Marine snipers. My apologies to the Marines, but I got to tell you the truth. Boom, boom, miss, miss. Reload, boom, got him in the stomach. And the one main bomb maker guy went down. Because the rules of engagement at that time, unless they're shooting at you, you have a positive identification of who it is, you can't shoot them. Now, nobody wears uniforms. The bad guys don't wear uniforms. And everybody carries guns. It's like Texas, that's why we're so polite. Texans are very polite people because everybody's armed. Yes, thank you very much. So in any event, he went down, and then the villagers ran out, put him on a tractor, tried to drive away. So the lieutenant wasn't gonna let this guy get away. He ordered the snipers to shoot the tractor, perfect shot the engine of the tractor. So the result was 1 tractor wounded, 1 bad guy killed, and no civilian injuries at all. What did the Marines do to him? They relieved him for cause, because he violated the rules of engagement by not getting permission to shoot the tractor. You can't make this up. So I called his boss up and I said, look, I'd like to come out, because you have to, when you do a relief for cause, you have a hearing. I'd like to come out and represent him for the hearing. No, you can't come. Okay, fine. I'm going to DC. I'm making a hold of the Army Times, Marine Times, and every other newspaper I can get to cover this story, because this is outrageous. When the American people find out what you're doing, they're going to go, what? And at first, Lieutenant Waddell did not want me to represent him. And that's how loyal this person was. He said, it's going to make the Marines look really bad if this ever comes out. How stupid this is. So his dad and I had to convince him, Josh, it's not just you, it's for all the other people that are getting, I don't want to use a bad word, we have too many ladies in the room, getting blanked by the R's and ROE. So then he relented. Anyway, bottom line is we hit the front pages, and people in the Pentagon, of course, the early bird, they started reading it and said, what the world's going on down there? He was promoted to captain, sent to the postgraduate naval school, and so his career took an exact turn. He's now a lieutenant colonel, very happily doing what he's doing. So that's what I kind of do. There is no other law school in the country that does anything like this, because it requires work. I don't take a dime for doing it. So I'm a full-time law professor, and I do this as well. There's yours truly up there giving a talk at the one of the organizations there in Germany at some point. There's the front page of the Marine Times, sacked and sold out. And so sometimes I go to court, sometimes I go to the media and say, look what's going on here. I've received presidential pardons. I've done 3 presidential pardons, received 2. That's amazing. Nobody gets a presidential pardon for cases that I've had. They're just outrageous. I have a team of law students that work with me, and they switch every year, so they get a lot of experience as well. And that's what I do for a living. Can we raise that up a little bit, that screen? Okay, I got to talk real fast. I'm from Alabama, of course, but I got to talk real fast. In Alabama, we have three. First of all, I guess make a disclaimer. I guess I forgot to do that. The views I give today do not reflect St. Mary's University School of Law. They're my own opinions. And it's, when free speech is based on consensus, there is no free speech. So some of you are going to be, oh, I don't like that. Well, have a nice day. I hear a lot of things I don't like, but I don't, fall off the deep end. I am a true liberal. So I always tell people I'm a conservative law professor. And I've debated the president of the ACLU behind enemy lines in Boston. About 100 people were in the audience. And I don't think many of them are really the holy roller types, but when I got through with her, they were elevating out of the chairs. They were so bad. So you can actually go to, I think, C-SPAN and see that debate. It wasn't much of a debate. But in any event, so I go to Yale, different law schools, and I debate people on the other side, that are not identified with the conservative branch. Conservatives, if you're a conservative, we're simple people. Life is not that hard. When a lot of liberal law professors have conferences, and I've seen a lot of them, they have a banner that goes from that wall to that wall. And you read the banner and it says, the epistemological rehabilitation of the concept of jurisprudence and social justice, always got in there, in the realm of the diversity of what the hell are you people talking about? They don't even know. When we have conferences, it's God, guns, barbecue. It's just not that hard. In fact, if I wasn't a law professor, I would be a psychologist. What a scam. Or a psychiatrist. You come in, tell me all your problems, $500 an hour, and when you're done, my advice is going to be the same for everybody, unless you need meds. If you need the meds, stay on the meds. But to most people, my remedy for all of them is get a job. If you've got a lot of problems, get 2 jobs. You've got way too much time on your hand, young man or young woman. You don't have time to think about me, poor me, my mama dropped me on my head, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Then we have also a generational problem right now, as we all know. Because where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit. This is illustrated by Joe Rogan. You know Joe Rogan, very popular now. He does a podcast, and last year, there was a fellow that got very upset with something that Joe Rogan said on the podcast. His name was Neil Young, who used to pay with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So Neil Young said, I'm gonna take all my stuff off Spotify if you don't shut down Joe Rogan. And so if you look at people from 20 to 40 and you ask them about this thing, they would say, if you look at people from 20 to 40, they would say, who is Neil Young? If you look at people from 40 to 60, they would say, I thought he was dead. If you look at people from 60 to 80, they'd say, what the hell's Spotify? So there we are. We're in a time when language changes all the time. I always tell my law students, they got new words like, you got to put your flex on. I said, what's flex? All the stuff that you got in this world and what you can do, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, okay. So anyway, yes, I'm a conservative law professor, which means life is not that hard. It's really not. It's really not. So we're going to talk about Ukraine. We're going to talk about Israel and Hamas, and we're going to talk about China. I've been to Ukraine at least 5 times, maybe 6, for extended periods of time in the 90s. I was sent there on a special mission to do various things, so I'm very familiar with the country and the leadership. I've been to Russia, of course, in the Middle East. I've been to Israel several times, been to Egypt, Kuwait, all those places. I've worked with the IDF, actually published a law review article with the IDF magazine. So I'm very familiar with those 2 areas. I've been to China several times. In fact, obviously, I don't like the sun. I go outside, I turn red. To me, a good day is a cloudy day. Everybody, it's a sunny day, isn't it nice? No, it's not. I like cloudy days. So when I went to China, I got off the plane, cloudy. I said, this could be great over here. And so those aren't clouds. What is it, smog? Yeah. They signed all these treaties, folks. They don't, again, a totalitarian regime is going to keep their word signing a treaty for climate change. Yeah, right. No, you're a fool if you believe that. When I was in the Pentagon, just a quick sidebar, I'm in the Pentagon, I'm the deputy for the International Operational Law Division. Madeline Halfbright, was that her name, Halfbright? Albright, that's right. So she comes back with a little thing from North Korea. Hey, I cut a deal with the dear leader, 1995. He will not build nuclear weapons. All we got to do is give him food, money, cigars, and cognac to the leader. Everybody, yay! And I'm thinking to myself, the Clintons aren't that stupid. They know this person. You're going to make a deal with a brutal, totalitarian ruler and think he keeps his word? And then 5 years later, he sets off a nuclear weapon, and all these people, oh my golly, he lied. You think? You think? Oh my golly. I'm more of a, Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly and carry a big stick. Teddy didn't come up with that, first of all. As an armchair historian, anybody know where he got it from? East African tribe in Africa. That was their motto. So he adopted it. He gave him credit in some of the speeches, but yeah, what does that mean? If you're a democracy, we got disputes, land disputes, border disputes, we can talk about it. If you're not a democracy, what do we got to say to you? Nothing. You show them the big stick, which is deterrence. And that's what keeps them in their cages. So it's real simple. It's not a Harvard term paper. There's no nuances to it. Bad guys are going to be bad guys. And that's just the way it is. So in Ukraine, also, Paul Harvey. The longer I live, the more I believe this is very true. The truth is always in the rest of the story. I'll give you an illustration about Ukraine. For the last couple of years, we're told the counteroffensive in the spring and it's all over. Russia's on the ropes. The next counteroffensive. And they never tell you the result of the counteroffensive. They're disastrous. The Russians are expert at artillery. First of all, this is a home game for Russia. Now, this is not a brief. Putin invaded another country. It's illegal. He's not a good guy. I got all that stuff. But I'm a realist. It's a home game for the Russians. You ain't going to beat the Russians on a home game. You can do it in Afghanistan. That's an away game. This is their border. It's not an away game. I don't care how many billions of dollars you put in there, you're not going to win unless you put ground troops in. Half the Ukrainian military is now dead or wounded. There's only 20 million people left in Ukraine. They're about bled dry. There's nobody left to fight. They're conscripting people off the streets. So if you're going to make a deal, now's the time to make a deal when you at least have some position of strength. But you're not going to win unless you want to start World War III. I don't. I'm good. So it's just not going to happen. And again, from Alabama, we have three categories of lies. We got lies, we got damn lies, and we got damn Yankee lies. It's a damn Yankee lie. You're not going to win. Just the next counteroffensive, yay! The Russians, what they do, if you're paying any attention to it, I know we got a lot of subject matter experts in here, much smarter than me. The Russians will pinpoint where they want the artillery to fire. They'll fall back to allow the counteroffensive to come into the area, and they'll obliterate them. They've done that like 4 or 5 times already. And no, it's not happening. You're not going to drive them out of the East. It's just not going to happen unless you're willing to go to a full-scale war. And so why can't we settle this with negotiations? It can be negotiated. There's ways to do it. You can hold free and fair elections because eastern part of Ukraine, there'd been a civil war going on in those territories about 7 years before Putin invaded. Did you know that? They wanted to secede from Ukraine. Crimea wanted to secede from Ukraine. But somehow, oh no, you can't secede. Why not? That's how we got here. We wrote the British a little love letter. Dude, we're out. No, you're not. Yeah, we are. No, you're not. We don't want to revolt. We just want to leave. We're not trying to overthrow London. And of course, power hates to give up power. Lord Acton said that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We went to guns for 6 years. With a little help from the French, we won. So yes, power never likes to give up power. I got all that. If you want, but see, if it's good enough for us, how can we deny that to other people? I just don't get it. So you've got to really look at this with a realistic lens. Plus, there's no accountability for the billions of dollars that we send over there. Nobody knows where the money went. Some of it went to the military, undoubtedly, but that's one of the most corrupt countries on the face of the planet. Having been there and worked with them, I can report, this is anecdotal evidence, but again, it's my opinion. Okay, let's go over to the Middle East. The history of the Middle East, again, everybody used to be somebody's baby. Well, this is our land. Okay, buddy. Right. So to get away from all that historical nonsense, what we do is we look at the United Nations. Are you a nation recognized by the United Nations? There's a little card. Is there a little card with your name on it? Yes, there is. It's called Israel, 1948. It was recognized as a nation state. For example, here in Texas, before we were the United States of America, what was this land you're sitting on right now? Who did it used to be? Republican? No. Wrong. The Confederate States of America, right? 1861, 1865. Before that, it was the Republic of Texas. No, before that, it was the United States. Then it was the Republic of Texas. And then you got Mexico and France, and then you got the Comanche. So if I go back in history, whatever land you're talking about, it was always somebody else's land. We don't do that anymore in the modern era. We gauge, are you a recognized nation state? Israel is a recognized nation state. The Palestinians are not. They are not recognized by the international community as a nation state. So if you look at the history of it, when Israel was formed, carved out in 1948, of course they'd been there. If you look at King David back in history, they've had a footprint there for a very long time. And so what did the surrounding Arab nations do? They immediately attacked to annihilate them off the face of the earth. That's a violation of the UN Charter. They were defeated militarily. They did it again in 67, defeated militarily. They did it again in 73, defeated militarily. So the land that now we have on the West Bank used to be Jordan. That was Jordanian territory. They lost in war. The Gaza and all that area and the Sinai Peninsula used to be Egyptian land. Well, they lost that. Of course, the Israelis have given back all that property. But for a very long time, the Israelis wanted to do a two-state solution. And that's just a fact. But again, the Hamas, which is in control of Gaza, their charter says, our position is we want to kill you. When I was at Guantanamo Bay, I actually got to talk to one of the radical Islamic extremists down there. Talked to the interpreters and the interrogators and this fellow, and basically, as lawyers, we like to negotiate. If you could imagine, if you had somebody from Gitmo, we got about 50 of them there right now, if you would say to that person, what do you want? You want some land? Do you want some money? How can we settle this? You know, let's negotiate. Their negotiating position is, I want to kill you. What's your counteroffer? Okay. That doesn't leave me much choice. I either got to kill you or keep you locked up. That's the position of Hamas. That's their negotiating position. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. And of course, on October the 6th, there was peace. There were no Israelis in Gaza whatsoever. Not a single Jew was in Gaza. And they did a bloodthirsty, murderous attack, as you know. The Israelis have the right to defend themselves under Article 51 of the UN Charter. And that's what they've been doing for a year. Now, our casualty figures for the Palestinians, guess who puts out the casualty figures? Hamas. Do you think they fudged the numbers? Yeah, I kind of do. Apart from the United States military, the Israeli military is the most professional military on the face of the planet. Again, I've worked with them. They could bend over backwards to limit civilian casualties. But when you're fighting in cities, like Berlin or whatever city it is, you're going to have higher civilian casualties. The question is, do you intentionally target civilians or not? So let's do a thought experiment. Suppose the Israelis disarmed immediately. What do you think would happen? They'd all be dead. Suppose Hamas disarmed immediately, what would happen? There'd be peace. If you just look at it realistically. So somehow we want to negotiate a settlement between Israel and Hamas without wiping them out, but we don't want to negotiate a settlement between Ukraine and Russia. It should be the opposite way. And there is no substitute for military victory. There is no substitute for military victory. We see that in many wars. And when you have a resounding military victory, you buy freedom for many generations to come. My dad was a World War II vet. I know we've got maybe some World War II vets in the room today. And they're going out fast. And so that generation was a tough generation. Oh my golly. His wife, my mother, is still alive at 95. And when they were younger, in their 70s, or my kid now, I got 125, 121, they go over and cut their grass, and my grandma would give them a quarter. Because they came up in the Depression. They knew the value of the dollar. I'd have to slip them a 20 on the side, but, and then I'd say, you see that sweet little white-haired woman there and how nice she is and gives you cookies and stuff. Said, when I was little, she tore my ass up. They didn't play. They understood discipline. They understood family values. They understood patriotism. And did you know God's a capitalist, as another side note? Thou shalt not steal recognizes your right to own private property. How about that? And what's the other of the Big Ten? You remember the Big Ten, right? Moses went up the hill, came back, he said, I got some good news and some bad news. And the Hebrew said, well, what's the good news? Well, I got him down to 10. So what's the bad news? The adultery thing's still in there. But in any event, another one of the Big Ten is, thou shalt not lust after thy neighbor's property. We call that equity today. You got it, I want it. Well, then get another job. But see, it's all relative. If somebody's got something that you don't have, you want it. And you can look at whatever the excuse is why you don't have it. You show me your bad cards in life and I'll show you mine. Don't get over yourself. You live in the greatest country the world has ever seen. And one of the things that's great about the military, when we would go to places like, garden spots like Haiti or Bosnia, you'd come back here and kiss the ground because it's all relative. There are many people, they don't have hot water. They can't go to a grocery store and get food and pave roads. Oh, but somebody else has got more. Okay. But see, the irony of it in the good book, if you don't have the capacity to enjoy what you have, you're miserable. King Solomon, he had everything. And yet the book of Ecclesiastes, I want to kill myself. Life is horrible. A lot of rich people kill themselves. I said, dude, if money makes you not happy, I got a solution. Write me a check. Be happy to take that burden away from you. No, it's not things that make you happy in this world. It's an orientation to reality. And by the way, as a side note, I do teach a Bible class at the law school for 15 years. I'm an originalist. That's what a conservative is. We're originalists. In other words, my favorite Supreme Court justice, not even close, is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is a man of great integrity. And in fact, he was raised by grandparents, and it's a great story. But he would always say, I remember this one thing, he said, when Clarence would get some grandfather tell him to do something, he'd say, well, I can't do that. And the grandfather would say, I buried Mr. Kent in the backyard, now go do it. I used that on my little kids one time. My youngest son, Blake, he was about 7. And I can't do that, Dad. I said, well, I buried Mr. Kent in the backyard. And the little blankety blank, he said, well, I'm going to get a shovel and dig him up. I think he got that from his mom. But Clarence, and having, again, I've done 3 weeks experience at the Supreme Court. So if you get the honor of going to the Supreme Court, you're a lawyer, and you're going to walk up and down and argue your case in the Supreme Court. It's a huge flex. And lawyers that do that, they go, oh, man, I'm arguing the Supreme Court. Do you really think you're changing anybody's mind on the Supreme Court with your arguments? No. They've already got their mind made up. And Clarence would never ask any questions except, I think he's done it twice the entire time he's done on the bench, because he's just not playing. It's hypocrisy. No, let me ask you a question, counsel. He don't care about what you think. He's already got his mind made up. He's being very truthful. But it makes lawyers feel good, and I can strut around like a rooster that I argue before the Supreme Court. In fact, you give me the case, I can give you the split before they even give us the split about what it's going to be. And I'm right most of the time, because you have 2 categories of justices. One are originalists and one are living constitutionalists. The living constitutionalists, it's the devil's playground, because they look at the Constitution and they don't have any respect for it, basically, because they don't care what the people meant when they wrote the words. They reinterpret it, they reimagine it. Well, the death penalty, no, we can't have that. So as an originalist, we know that the death penalty, people on the left say, well, it's unconstitutional, it's a violation of the cruel and unusual clause in the Bill of Rights. Okay, well, we'll consider that. Let's go back in a time machine and talk to the founders. Did you mean that the death penalty violated the cruel and unusual clause in the Bill of Rights? They'd laugh you out of the room. Of course not. We were talking about the state can't crucify you or burn you to death. The death penalty is fine. So therefore, I would come back in time like Clarence Thomas and say, yeah, the death penalty is great. And, so again, if you call the dean and say that I believe in the death penalty, they already know it, folks. Yes, it's legal and it's moral. But an originalist, that's what they do. They don't want to substitute their superior brain. They want to know what the founders meant when they wrote it. All of you were originalists at one time. When you were a little kid, you got a little note from somebody and it said, "Ooh, I really like the way you combed your hair." You want to know exactly what that person meant when they wrote that. You didn't want to superimpose your ideas of what it meant. You were an originalist, even people on the left. At one time, you were an originalist before you went bad. Because if you're a living constitutionalist, you must admit, I can find your right to marry a goat. It's been there all along. I found it. So that's the danger, because it is the devil's playground. I'll be whatever I want to be. There's no predictability. And I like predictability in relationships. I want to know that when I say something that, we understand what I'm saying, not what you think I said and what you want it to be. As my great-grandmother used to say, she's from Alabama, she'd say, "Honey child, you can wish in one hand and spit in the other and see which one fills up first." Yes, I wish we had peace in the world. But as the Lord Christ said, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars until I come back, right? He ain't back. So in peacetime, we need to arm ourselves to the teeth. Republicans, Democrats alike, peacetime dividend, we cut the military now because we're at peace. There'll always be another war. The time to build up the military is now. The Chinese are building their navy like crazy, and their nuclear arsenal like crazy. We've got to build, and if it requires tightening the belt, we need to tighten the belt and build up a massive military, because what keeps bad guys in their cages is deterrence. That's what it does. I mean, that's what happens. When they see that you are not willing or able to use your military in a decisive way, that's when they come out of the cages. And that's just a lesson from history. Okay, so one of the good things in the military, as we all know, time on target. I know my time's up. I do have a book. It looks damn good from 5 feet away. This book took me about 50 years to write. I've written over 100 books and stuff, but this book, I started at 18. And because I got 2 direct great-grandfathers that rode with these fellas. And it's about the use of terror tactics by the Union. Now, this book, I'm perfectly satisfied. God controls history. Yes, I'm satisfied that the United States is one country, so it's not a brief for a neo-Confederacy or whatever. It's just exploring normal people that fought against terror tactics. And it's shocking. What the Union did is absolutely despicable in terms of the last year of the war. Just very briefly, in 1864, President Lincoln thought he was going to lose the election and it would be over. He actually wrote letters to his cabinet saying, "I apologize, I'm not going to win." And so he came up with a new strategy to win the war. And he brought General Grant into Washington, D.C., appointed him chief of the Army. And Grant's strategy was, okay, here's what we're going to do. In the spring of '64, I'm going to bunch up a massive army to go directly at Robert E. Lee in the east. I'm going to bunch up another massive army to go against the other Confederate army, which is in Dalton, Georgia, under Johnston in the west. And we're just going to do the porcupine. Nothing fancy. We're just going to go forward, and we're just going to take casualties until we bleed them dry. So he stopped prisoner of war exchanges, because the Confederacy was getting their manpower from exchanges from POW. Stopped it. Even knowing that the South couldn't even feed their own soldiers, let alone Union POWs. And then, of course, they could just get conscripts off the boats coming in all the time. He had an unlimited number of new recruits coming in. And so, and that's what the plan was. And then he said, the third leg is, we're going to target civilians with terror. Absolute terror. And the chief purveyor of that was General Sherman in his march from Atlanta. So when Sherman took his army group and beat the Confederates, that what was left of them went up into Tennessee. Sherman's in Atlanta in September. And he says, okay, I'm going to march across Georgia, and I'm going to pillage and burn and devastate the civilian population. And that's what he did. So this book, and the companion book to it, kind of destroys all the mythologies, because the mythology is that Sherman's fighting behind enemy lines. There was no enemy to fight. The mythology is I had to live off the land. That's a lie. He brought with him 2,500 brand new wagons filled with over 2 million rations for his soldiers. He brought along 10,000 cattle. He calculated exactly how much food he'd need for the 30-day march to Savannah. He didn't need to take an ear of corn. And yet he allowed his men to pillage. So the average farm, and again, this is not just white Southerners, folks. I got documentation up here, you wouldn't believe it, to black Southerners. Both free and enslaved black Southerners were targeted horribly by Union soldiers. In fact, a lot of black Southerners that embraced freedom, who wouldn't, they they were very perplexed about the atrocities that were committed against them by Union soldiers. So it's an interesting read if you care about the truth, and it dives into all these particular things. But the average Southerner didn't own slaves. 85% didn't own slaves. The average Southerner was a dirt farmer. You had a dog trot cabin. You might have 10 acres of corn that you would grow, and then of course you would sell some for salt. There's no HEBs. You had to go, get your wagon or your mule and go into town and get salt or whatever you had to do. You'd have your own smokehouse, your own, kill your own animals and all that type of stuff. So as Sherman's armies approached it, they spread out in a swath of 60 miles into little groups. You come up on an average farm. There's no man around. It's a woman with children and some elderly. They would force the woman to cook food for them first. Then they would ransack the house and steal everything they wanted. Then they'd burn the house down. Then they'd take all the food out of the barns, burn the barns down. Then they'd kill every animal on the farm. Every cow, every chicken, everything. Pets, whatever it was. This is wintertime. This is November. And you'd be left there starving with nothing. And they'd move on to the next one, and the next, and the next. This is absolutely despicable. And what really got me going, well, this was during the 1991 Gulf War, they asked Schwarzenegger, Schwarzkopf. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, Schwarzkopf. They said, who is your hero? Who do you emulate in American history as a general? He said, Sherman. I about fell off my couch when I heard that. He was a worthless general, absolutely worthless. And if you really want to end the war, 1864, landed fell in September. Grant's up here with Lee getting his butt kicked. But all you have to do, and Lee was being bled to death, all Sherman had to do is come up on the back door. War's over by Christmas of 64. You got one massive army coming up. Instead of terrorizing civilians, go up this way to the back door. Grant's here. When Lee's done, it's done. Why didn't they do that? Well, it's just human nature. Grant doesn't want to share the glory. He's got to be the next president. If I let Sherman come up the back door, I got to share the hoo-ha. Didn't want to do it. And I've got a lot of telegrams in here and newspaper articles. It's just human nature. My final thing, when my first year law students come in, I said, why do we have the law? And they come in, because we got to have justice in the land, we got to have virtue. No, but that's not why we have the law. We have the law because people lie, steal, and cheat. That's why we have the law. Okay, so I'll break it off there. We have no time for questions. And I'll take a couple questions. Be happy to.
We've got time for questions.
We got time for questions. Okay.
I wonder if you could comment on Citizens United from your perspective.
I've heard of the group. I'm not really that familiar with them. I can't. What's that?
The law that came out of that said corporations were people and could not be treated any differently than a person.
Yeah, I mean, again, corporations for the purposes of federal civil procedure jurisdiction are treated as citizens, subject matter jurisdiction and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of strange ideas that have come out in the last 4 years. I believe in Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So yeah, there's a lot of people that have different ideas about basic values that we've had for centuries and centuries and centuries. Again, I'm a liberal. You do you, but please let me do me. I'm not going to bow down to what you think is your reality, and you don't have to bow down to mine, but I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. I'm just not. The way I read my Bible is the way I read my Bible. And either you're wrong or the Bible's wrong.
Do we have any questions over here? Anybody? Any questions in the center? Got a question over here. Here comes your mic right there.
Can you comment on the Daniel Penny trial?
Well, again, it's a fair legal system. I believe that we're going to have a verdict. The jury's heard, witnesses from both sides.
Some people may not know what that
Yeah, so the Perry trials, you got a guy on the subway. According to some witnesses, this person came in, was threatening to kill people on the subway, very agitated. Perry and a couple other people confronted this person. Perry put him in a headlock, and depends on who you believe. Some witnesses said that he was, using the necessary force to subdue him. Others say that he choked him to death. So again, I don't have all the facts, and I hate to comment on things that I do not have all the facts. But again, the system of our jurisprudence is to try to get to the truth. But as you know and I know, there are many cases where, like a defense counsel, a good analogy, how could you represent that person that you know? I was a defense counsel. most of my, in fact, all my clients in the military as a defense counsel were guilty. I knew they were guilty because I've been a defense counsel. About 1/3 of them were found not guilty at trial. Not because I was such a good lawyer, the other side was like shockingly bad. I mean, but, so what's the solution? Was justice done? Yeah, my role is not to be the jury. My role is in the system, I do my part, and, we do the best we can. But I'm not one of these that says that we need to get rid of the American jury system, this system, that system. We do the best we can. We're dealing with humans. And anytime you have humans involved in any system, it's not going to be perfect. So, from what I've seen, I would give the benefit of the doubt to Perry based on the facts and circumstances, but I don't have all the facts and circumstances. I myself have done similar things. I haven't killed anybody, but I have put myself in between bullies that were trying to do bad things to people. In fact, I got an award from the military one time. The guy was trying to knife this girl, and I put myself between him and her and hurt my shoulder. But so yeah, it's whatever way it turns out. I'm sure that he has that it'll be justice will be served.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.